we've gotten questions around, if we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, shouldn't we also be talking about diversity of thought, especially as it relates to the diversity part of the DEI acronym? Now, that's a really tricky question because we don't want to overlook what DEI really means. What I mean by that is when we're talking about diversity in the DEI acronym, we're really talking about representation, right? We're talking about groups of people that have been underrepresented, undervalued in the workplace, in the education system, and throughout history, right? And so what that means is that, for example, people who identify who are women, Black, within the LGBTQIA community, who are a religious minority within the United States, are not represented in certain fields and spaces. Some of it is very intentional, very conscious biases, and some of it is unintentional and unconscious biases. The truth is, a lot of people are not given the opportunity to excel or be their best selves simply because we put them in a box, right? So diversity of thought says you and I can look the same and have different varying points. We don't have to look different. And while that's technically true, it's really important to not just use that when we're talking about diversity. Because again, think about it. If we want different people to be represented, and then we're also saying, well, look, we can look the same and still have different points. When we say that, what ends up happening is that we begin to overlook the real work of representation, for example, in the workplace, right? We start to focus on things like, well, we don't have to put an initiative out there or really change our hiring policies and our recruitment, for example. We don't have to be as inclusive because we could have people who look like us but think differently. Now, you can see how that can be dangerous, right? Because it's not doing DEI work, right? We're not being equitable and inclusive if that's the lens that we're coming from. Because like I said, there are groups in this country and outside of this country that have not been given their due diligence and rights to be successful, right? Through our policies, through our culture, through our history, all of these different things come together to create inequitable structures. And so if we're going to make it equitable, we have to be inclusive. We have to be equitable in our practices when we're hiring, when we're recruiting, and making sure that we're creating workplaces where people can thrive in, right? And so again, diversity of thought on its own, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad concept. You want people to have different ideas and opinions. Sometimes that's what allows us to really push ourselves, right? To give ourselves more opportunities, whether it's in the workplace or within our communities. But if we only look at that or try to compare that to what diversity means, we really miss the point and opportunity to create better structures and workplaces in general. I want to hear what you all think. When you hear people asking that question, how do you answer it? What are some ways you've told people why diversity of thought is or isn't part of DEI work? Because maybe you might think about this differently than I do. Would love to hear from you.